Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Faisal Khan, and in this video, we're going to discuss the Flow Designer, which is basically an scripting tools available from Cisco WebEx Contact Center. Now, the Flow Designer provides an interface for you to create a real-time call flow for your organizations that meet your business requirement. Now, when you start a new flow, it will look something like this, where you have a name of the flow that you must define. You can always change this name if you want to. And it will come with something called a new phone contact event. Now, this is a drag and drop user interface, makes it easy for you and I to configure the component. And you can always set properties of each activities that can influence the execution of the flow. Now you can also configure various variables and expressions that will define the logic for your call flow. Now on the left hand side, you have what we call is the activity library or call handling, as well as flow control. Now call handling is related to dealing with the calls itself, whereas like transferring the calls to an agent, creating a menu, or collecting digit, anything to interact with the call. Whereas flow control will provide more flow related tasks such as connecting to an external server, making decisions, going to a different script and whatnot. Now, before you get to work with a Flow Designer, you want to make sure that you provision all the entities that are required for your flow to use. For example, when you're creating a Flow Designer, you want to transfer the call to, let's say, an agent. Well, you must have the agent created in advance. If you're transferring the call to a queue, you got to make sure the queue is in there. If you want to use a welcome prompt, you got to make sure the welcome prompts are there. If you want to connect to Google Dialogflow or text to speech, you have to make sure all those things are either set up in advance or you have to set them up before you get to use it for your script. Now, a flow as WebEx Flow call flow basically contains things like activity, event, flow, and the link. Now, activity is the task or the node. We call it in UCCX world steps or node. On the left hand side, you can drag and drop whatever the activities that you want, whether the activity is a call handling activity or if it is a flow control activity, but you can easily drag and drop anywhere you want. Now, these activity basically provides all the executions that you need to complete your flow. User can drag and drop them. You can define a label for them. For example, let's say I want to change them to welcome message, and that will change the name of the activity. Now, the beginning activity that you see is called an event, which is the start of the flow. So every script that you ever work with in the past, you probably realize that a programming world that there is always a start node and there's always an end node. Well, here the start node is called the new phone contact. Now, this is a phone call, so therefore it's going to have a phone contact. Each one of these activity that you see will have properties, and some of these properties could be drop-down based. Some of them will be selected by an options depending on what you want. For example, if I choose this option, I have a drop-down trigger event, which is called new phone contact. If I select the welcome message, then I will have a drop-down event where I select a the prompts. Along with, I may have some other values that I can provide. Now, each one of these nodes will have different values that you can assign or properties that you can assign. Now, they are not necessarily unique. Some may be the same, but then they all may have some unique value that you may need to supply. Now, each one of this activity will also, not necessarily all, will produce an output. For example, in a new phone event, it will produce activity output, which is basically going to create a system variable. Now, these system variables can contain information related to the call or certain values that coming generated because of that activity. For example, if you want to collect the data from the user, like you want to collect their PIN number, well, that PIN number when you collect has to be stored somewhere. Well, the activity that is responsible for collecting the data from the user will create a variable that you can use, which will contain the value the user entered. Now, let's say you make a call to your contact center And in this contact center, when the call comes in, new phone contact will get activated. As soon as it does, it's going to create a 4 output variable. And these output variable may contain like the new phone contact.ani, which contains the caller ID of the call. It contains the DNIS, the number that the user have dialed to reach this flow. It may contain the interaction ID, which is basically similar to session ID. And of course, the PSTN region. Now, the PSTN region that is configured will be depending on what is defined in your entry point. Now, we'll talk about that later. So let's say all of these activity that you see, they all have a variable type. Now, we'll talk about more details about variable in the subsequent chapter, where we'll learn how to create string variables, number variables, and other variables that are available to us. Let's say I want to use some of these variables. So when a call comes in, I want to validate that did the call came in because the user dialed certain numbers, right? There are two ways a call can come into flow. One, someone dial a number, phone numbers, or B, maybe another script called this script. So sometimes you may need to validate that, okay? So for example, I want to find out that did the user dial, because first of all, if you call from one script to another script, then the dial number may not necessarily be the one that is configured for this script, right? Because the dial number was from another script. Whereas if I want to check that, like I want to check what number user dial, what I can do is that I can use the condition steps or activity. I'm a UCCX and UCC guy, so I keep saying the steps, but it's basically activity in WebEx Contact Center. So I want to check the conditions. I want to see what the DNIS is. So what I'll do, I will copy this variable from the new phone contact node or activities. I will copy these DNIS variables. I can click this little button there. And in the condition, where is the expression, I can put here. So first of all, I would like to change the name. Let's call this check DNIS. Okay. Continue if user dialed 1-866-777-0060. So you'll only continue if user dialed this particular number. Why is that necessary? Because if for some reason call came into this flow because of another call flow, maybe someone mistakenly configured that. It could happen. Well, I don't want to continue. So if the call came into this flow because someone dialed that phone number right here, only then we will continue. So what we'll do in your phone contact.dnis, we're going to say if the DNIS is equal to this particular phone number. Okay. Now again, someone might be dialing 1-866-777-0060. Somebody could be dialing only 866-77-0060. Someone might be dialing the +1. So you got a couple of options here, right? So I'm going to say that if the numbers are either this, or I can copy and paste. If the number is without the 1 or with the +sign. So I have a choice. If the DNIS happens to be one of them, now I did say or because obviously it's going to be either one of these three options. Either someone dial 10-digit, someone dial 11-digit, or someone dial the international E.164 number. If that is the case, then it is true. Otherwise, it's going to be false. So if it is false, I can just simply say end the flow. So I can disconnect the false to the end flow. Okay, so the goal is if the call came here because of someone dialed one of these three numbers, then we will continue play maybe the welcome message, right? So you can use the variable that was resulted because of the start event or start flow, the activity output, and you could use that value to validate your applications. So every node will have maybe one or two output. Now, some of them will not have any output at all, like play music doesn't have an output, check conditions doesn't have output, and flow doesn't have any output. But if I put something like, let's say HTTP request, well, it will have three output, right? If I use case, it no output for that. So depending on what activity that you use, your output variables may vary. Now, those are system variables. Okay, you can create your own variables, which I'll show you in the subsequent videos as well. All right, so we have seen that, as I mentioned, that a flow will contain activity, and these node or block that makes up the flow is called activity. Then you have something called event. An event is an internal or an external stimulus to the system, which may cause a flow or flow path to be executed. For example, I could create an event that call HTTP request to Oracle database, and then I will get a response from that. And based on the response, I will continue executing my applications with the response that is coming from the event. So when I call an Oracle database will respond either with records that is found, or basically with no record message. And I will have to then take that message in my flow, parse it, and then take whatever the necessary actions that I want. So you got the activities and you got the event. Then you have the flow itself, where you have a user-defined sequence of activity that are executed in a response to an event. Now, each one of these activity must be linked. So you must complete all these particular links. See, right now, if I click this link, by linking it means that you're going from step 1 to the next step, step 2 to the third step, step 3 to the fourth step, and so on and so. You gotta make sure that every connection is closed. See, right now you notice I did not close the undefined error. There is another node that needs to be closed. I could point that to the end flow. If you do not close it, then the validation of the script will fail. So every node has to be closed. So as you can see, the welcome message has to be closed as well at some point. Now, I really don't find the user, this type of what you call flow diagram. It can be quite messy, because if you're looking at UCCX or UCCE scripting, and you have a lot of nodes to deal with, it is very difficult to kind of find things. And this is even worse in my opinion. But of course, then it depends on the individual. So as I say, that there are two types of activity that you have. You got your flow control activity, call handling activity, and flow control. The call handling activity is basically used to build the flow that handle the voice interaction with your contact center. They are specific to use case of handling calls through your IVR and virtual or human agent. Whereas the control flow is basically agnostic to the flow type, and you can use them to control the logic in your flow regardless of whatever the use case of your script. You can hide and expand the activity library as desired to make sure that you have, whatever makes sense. You can like collapse it and expand it based on your needs. You can also click on this little button to hide it from your screen so that you have more workspace in your environment. All right, so once you have the activity on the footer, you can see that you have the autosave. Now, autosave will automatically save the script. One of the things that every time it saves it, it will create, every time you make a change and it's saving it, it's going to create a new version for that. Now, if you don't want to autosave it, you want to uncheck that option and make sure you save it every time you want to, if you do a large amount of changes to your script. Now, then there is a validation. Validation means it's going to go through and validate your script. So for example, I'll save it first, then I'll turn on the validation, and it's going to give me an error messages. And that error could be that either I'm missing a connection, or I'm missing some values in the audio prompt, or maybe something else. I'm not going to go through this error right now, but just to let you know. So the main flow, and this is your main flow. And then you also have something called event flow. Event flow will basically contain some additional event that handles behind the screen. Now, the main flow tab, which is basically your primary script flow based on your trigger event that is defined in your flow activity. In the main flow, you can configure your end-to-end experience for your caller, starting from your IVR to menus, from collecting digit until the user either opt out or you wrap up the call. Whereas the event flow, at any point during your execution of your main flow, a system may trigger an event that interrupts the main flow. For example, when an agent answers a call, and a caller experience in the queue will be interrupted. Now, if you want to define a unique behavior for when such event is triggered, you can script an optional event flows if you want to. Event flows are asynchronous to the main flow. You cannot predict if and when the event flow will be triggered. Now, for this reason, event flows are optional and are intended to extend the main flow functionality. For example, if you look at here, an agent is offered. When an agent is offered, so if I go to the main flow, let's say I want to connect the call to a queue contact, okay? When I click on queue contact, it's going to ask me for a queue. And then if I go to the event flow, suddenly additional event nodes or activities has been added. And one of them is called event answer. So imagine when our agent answers the call, some contact center wants to have a pop-up screen on the agent to get information about the customer presented to the agent. Well, what we can do, if we want to pop up a screen when agent answers the call, right here under agent answer, we can drag and drop this option called screen pop-up. Okay, so we're going to say that whenever agent answers, if you trigger the event, agent answered, and then initiate a pop-up screen. Now, we're going to learn about the pop-up screen later in the course, how to use it and how to pass data to your agent. But right now, just understand the concept that at any given time, if I am triggering a certain event, that could be agent answered the call, phone call ended, agent disconnected, agent was offered, or if there is a global error, I can take certain action. So this is what the event flow does. Now, you don't really have to configure anything on the event flow other than just ending the call to it, but some cases it may be useful to take certain activities. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about in this is that if you click on this gray area, which is your IDE or development area, you have the global properties for this script. You can provide a description for this script. You can create something called curve link, which will create more like a curvy type of link, or you can curvy link could be useful creating more visual, attractive visual depending on how you want. Or you can simply say, no, I don't like curve link. I like more like, straight forward. You can even change your color of your link. You don't like dark. You want to say, I want to have this type of a green, red color, whatever the options you have available, feel free to choose that. Now, variable. This is in the properties, you can define certain variables here. You can add your variable. These are, you can view certain type of variables by kind of like creating a list of them, or you can say all variables. Now, again, we're not going to talk about variables right now in details. We're going to talk about a variable in a different chapter, but these are all the variables currently available for your script based on what we have selected. Okay. You have your agent offered ID, contact ID, agent team name, everything that you need. Now, again, the only reason we have all this because of the activity that we have selected. You can always add your own variable by add flow, and you can specify the variable type. You can define a variable to contain some sensitive data, such as credit card information, password, or PIN number, whatnot. So all of them is configurable from the global property. Now, you can also have the name of the flow owner, last time it was edited, and if there is any output variables available for your flow. For now, that's all in terms of introduction to your flow designer. Get familiar with it. play around with the various settings to make sure that you feel comfortable with it. All right. So right now in WebEx Contact Center, there is no version control feature. The flow version is the number of the time the flow has been published. So there is no version control features that is available in WebEx Contact Center as of November 2023. All right, so that's it for this video. Until then, I will see you in the next video.